Hi, welcome back. This is the Gospel According to Now, Chapter 6, baby. We're getting there. Ooh, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that spirit. I'm telling you, I got a joy in my heart that cannot be named. Oh, wait, maybe it can. Thanks, Papa. Thank you, Father. Anyway, this is Chapter 6. I hope that you enjoy it, because I know I do. Okay, here we go. Let's begin, shall we? Jesus was delighted to have written over 100 pages of his book. The final segment of the gospel, the conclusion to thousands of years' worth of miracles. His existence in this day and age was nothing short of a miracle, and Jesus embraced being the crucible. Formed by tremendous heat and pressure, the life that Jesus had chosen to live was one defined by his ability to overcome darkness and entwine with his Father, despite the enemy's unrelenting efforts to keep him in a state of separation. As Jesus wrote, reality formed in the direction of salvation, freeing himself from the bondage he had been tricked into adhering to. The satisfaction he attained through overcoming darkness was undeniable. Some days he experienced the lows of being human, but today he was completely in the Spirit. Tears were intermixed with genuine joy and peace. He was the Son of Man, and there was no denying his purpose on earth. Ushering in a new dawn, his empathy and love was shaping the world around him. Though he was mostly in solitude, those around him were still being shaped by the energy culminating and releasing from his presence. There was no denying that he was living the life he had been born to live. Instead of pursuing earthly pleasure, he was accepting all aspects of the mortal coil. Pain, sorrow, relief, and enlightenment were all defining his existence. The desert sun beat down on his bronze skin, and a light breeze kissed his body as he sipped his coffee and wrote down words of truth. He was embracing himself, embracing God, embracing his humanity. It was only through resistance that he had been trapped in dismay and fear. Jesus was responsible for the rewiring of his brain after a lifetime of his mind being controlled by the Antichrist. Each night his dreams reflected the grief that Jesus was experiencing in his waking hours. Leaving behind what he loved was something that had been easier for him than for others, but he was coming to understand that he was affected by his need to leave, just later than expected. To those around him, Jesus could be perceived as detached and unaffected by his choices, but that was far from the truth. Daily, Jesus released streams of tears, experiencing feelings of regret toward the past. He had to remind himself that his being had been entirely poisoned over the course of 32 years, and that it would take years to eradicate the damage done. Having to be separate from those he loved was a necessary, though searingly painful reality. Just as in his first coming, his relationship with his Father took precedence over his relationship with other humans. Despite this fact, Jesus still longed for the comfort of family. The unfamiliarity of his surroundings was actually a bit frightening to him, despite the fact that he was protected by his Father. It was hard for Jesus to admit that he wanted a normal life like any other person, that his strange and narrow path had led him to a place where he desired contentment, not just spiritually, but physically too. This desire was overwhelming to Jesus and caused him to experience a deep sadness, which led to many tears. After a good night's sleep and some communication with others, he realized that the feelings he was having were normal. Jesus sat with his tobacco and coffee, listening to music as usual. There wasn't much more for him to do than that, and he knew that this was enough. After constant movement, persistent displacement, and unrelenting persecution, Jesus accepted that his resistance to calm was to be expected. It was the Sabbath, and Jesus was living in his element while sitting outside connecting with a young lost woman. Jesus had come to understand that the key to enlightenment was coming full circle and returning to the state of purity which exists when we are born into this earth. Instead of viewing enlightenment as an ascension upward, he came to view it as a completion of a circle. Through growth and death, one could reach wholeness. Without great suffering, you cannot feel the opposite, and Jesus was coming to the place he needed to be to recalculate his presence on earth. Jesus was confirming within his own thoughts and presence what he truly consists of. Instead of subscribing to dark ideations fueled by ongoing lies and deceptions, Jesus instead chose to believe what was true, that he was holy, sacred, necessary, valuable, worthy, and capable. Coming home to himself had taken 33 years of suffering and separation, reaching truths regarding God's character through strife. Never again did Jesus require himself to forget his true purpose in order to achieve oneness with every spiritual entity. He was free from the desire to change evil and had shifted into acceptance in regards to its eternal damnation. He was coming to understand that he was pure and perfect in his formulation for his intended purpose. No longer did he view himself as expendable or unworthy of love from others. He accepted that only those with love in them could love him, and he was not required to love those without it. He would no longer engage in pouring water into vessels riddled with holes, the holes caused by one's refusal to turn away from their evil deeds. There were vessels that who not only needed what Jesus had to offer, but were worthy of receiving it. His own family was now the focus of his healing, as Jesus had been enlightened to the fact that by loving them, he would love himself. He had stopped living in condemnation and punishment, and there was no more room left for untruths and deceptions. Freedom had been at the bottom of what seemed to be an endless containment. The smashing and breaking of his own vessel had softened Jesus back to a point of childlike vulnerability, with a maturity that had developed through the searing reconstruction of a shattered being. His resurrection and his second coming would not arrive without death of the self, all innocence and naivety relinquished by pain. Enlightenment could not come without total darkness, and realize that in the darkest of places and times, he was the light. Expecting it to come from another, always seeking what could not be found, had left Jesus destitute. His land had been laid waste and made barren, scorched by the Antichrist's unrelenting assault upon his soul. Within the soil, seeds had planted themselves from the tree which had been burned down, and from the waste of death came unabounding life. His Father was the great tree which Jesus' vine entwined, supplying the space and territory for Jesus to grow upward. He was a new creation. The crucible which resulted from infinite love and sacrifice of God's sovereign will, formed in the fire of an ancient adversary's oven. There was nothing which could stop nor interfere with Jesus' true path, and every act of hate he had endured had only aided in his reformation. Ain't that nice? From his line, God had continued to bring forth peacemakers and truth speakers, those who cherished the land and sought to live with it. He had bred out hate using love and now already won. Jesus had spent exactly 7 years on his journey with his Father, never rejecting that God's will mattered more than his own. Learning to recognize God's will had taken time and destruction, the dismantling of a false identity necessary in order to come back to his true self. Without the rejection and persecution he had experienced, there would have been no glory to attain. Jesus had proven himself time and time again. Jesus was now dwelling amongst his people. Though he could not do just what others were doing, he still embraced being a visitor and a light while he could, which tested his faith, perseverance, and patience. Pardon me, that was a long pause. Salon pause. Jesus was adjusting to being out of the dimension he had just traveled to, understanding that he did not just exist in one measure of time or space, but interdimensionally had changed his perspective toward his own worth. Jesus' jurisdiction ran through all of existence, and his methods of travel always coincided with the supernatural. When traveling with only the Father, one must remain with the Father, never straying from the appropriate behavior of God's child. Being his master's servant, his Father's ambassador, was his claim in every space he entered. Safely passing through lower dimensions was the result of his close relationship with his Father in heaven. Jesus traveled the depths of hell and stood amongst his people without fear, but with great caution. It was not difficult for a dark spirit to slip into the company of Jesus, but the Son of Man handled it always with grace. In the past, when Jesus was of his younger years, he had held fast to the faith by fighting for his life. Now he was just being himself, praying for that to be enough for those around him who had lives with allotted time slots and plans. After 32 years of survival, disarmed at the hands of the enemy, that damned Antichrist, Jesus was exhausted of his strength. He needed to be where he was spiritually safe, but he had been separated from peace so unrelentingly that it had taken him a majority of portion of his life thus far to get to focus on maintaining it. My handwriting got a little wild in this little segment here. I don't know what the deal is. Anyway, Jesus was learning to cope with the day-to-day realities of life on earth after a long, arduous journey. All Jesus really had the energy to do was be. He knew that one had to work on this planet to be viewed as valuable, but Jesus could no longer subscribe to a price tag for his energy. Neither did Jesus relate his worth any longer to how much he could do or by how useful he was to others. He felt much like someone who had spent their whole life in a cage. Jesus placed his soft gray blanket folded up onto the cement wall which bordered the yard of the house he was dwelling in. Before him was a large tree with far-reaching branches settled between 3 large shrubs and 2 smaller trees. "Go ahead, little Buddha. Get on your wall," he joked aloud, causing Jesus to laugh at himself. He delighted in the moments he could find humor in it all, and had an increasing joy that would manifest when thinking of the ways he had won the victory. Jesus was enjoying his freedom. Sitting outside with nature around him was enough communication and stimulation for his being. He loved simply basking in the beauty of the world around him, as opposed to the rush he had once embraced. Jesus could feel that he was blessed beyond all measure as he relaxed into the breeze that rustled the trees. All of creation sang to Jesus and of Jesus as he rang out praises unto them. Jesus was preparing himself for the cleansing to come, enjoying his Friday morning among the trees. In only 3 days, he would embark upon a journey with sacred medicine, a route through consciousness made way by a plant root called iboga. He had met with a medicine woman a day prior to discuss the details of the experience. Just like that, with ease, God put his son exactly where he needed to be. The exploration of his own inner world for 36 hours would no doubt prove to be enlightening. He was aware of the dark places he had been, the depths of filth and depravity he had endured. The only way out is through, he spoke aloud to himself. Jesus had been remaining in prayer, writing out his moments of defeat, as well as his moments of victory. He was inspired to write what he sought to gain from the experience, and did so. This was no small matter, what he was about to embark upon, and he accepted a healthy sense of respect toward the situation at hand. Jesus sat cross-legged, his left heel to his groin and his right heel atop his left thigh. Remaining present by being in a state of gratitude was the only way to handle what he had been experiencing. He was growing weary of carrying around burdens from the past and prayed for release from intrusive memories. His body and soul had been through such an arduous journey on their way back to each other. The unionizing of his self could only occur by dismantling the walls of separateness and isolation. What was to come, he could not imagine, though his mind came up with situations that brought him awareness. Memories from his early life were becoming prominent alongside his recent experiences, as if though a parallel in time and circumstance. The repeated recycling of Jesus' deep wounds had toxified his body in a way that had affected everything. Jesus knew that sharing himself with his people could not occur until he no longer held resentments against them. Humanity had belittled and rejected Jesus the way they do their Father in heaven, ignoring or using him for his light. Jesus had allowed this for reasons he was only beginning to understand. The cellular damage that was done by enduring terror and fright had rewired the circuit board of Jesus' being. He knew something had not been quite right in his life, that there had been an exponential amount of dark and otherworldly influence upon him. If anyone could restore what had been stolen and ransacked, it was Jesus himself. He was actively choosing to recognize that he could, in fact, heal himself. With God's guidance and undying loyalty to his Son, Jesus could face the depths of hell once more. That's good stuff. Woo-hoo. Amen. Feeling that power, feeling in the spirit today. I like this shirt. I don't know if y'all noticed, but I'm doing like a little rainbow, little red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink, which is what I'm gonna be doing because God, the rainbow is God's promise to human beings that there's reconciliation and peace and healing to be had. It's really not about sex with people that are of your same gender, but it's totally stolen. Totally appropriated. It's really funny how much is appropriated from the Bible and from Jesus' story in general. I mean, literally, there's just like this one book, and every movie, show, a book after that is based somehow off of this one narrative. I mean, there's such a rich amount of material to steal from. So, that's what we did. And that's how the rainbow works. That's how the rainbow works. So, I am so excited to share this with you. Thank you for listening. And I hope everybody has a beautiful, blessed Sunday. All right? Bye bye.